Okay. So of course we can all make the best plans, but there are obstacles, and those obstacles can be external, real logistics. Like, for example, I live outside of Boston, and the commuter rail that goes into the city has half the times that it used to. So that's like a real obstacle that if I had to think about getting into Boston daily, that has real impact to what that looks like and how I do it from a logistical standpoint. I'm not, I, that's just like one simple example. So those are clear obstacles that you do have to navigate. What I'm more referring to here is internal obstacles and what those look like. So often we kind of create our own internal dialogue and blocks that hold us back. And those, while take practice and mindset shifts and behavior shifts, and over time, certainly we can try to barrel through those. We definitely have the ability to unblock the obstacles that we have internally in our own minds. Sometimes we're our worst enemies. So there's a lot of different ways that these show up. I have in here a few. Yep.
And I have an anonymous question actually, and I think it might tie in here. So I figure I'll just
go for it.
Up. So the question is, how much time do I allot to my plans and my goals? And so I wonder, I'm seeing you have time here as one of those things that might get in the way. So I don't know if that would tie in.
So when you say time, like meaning how much time do you spend working on them, or how much time?
I'm not sure. The question came anonymously, so I'm not sure. But maybe we can hit on both. I took it as how long should I allot, to reach my goals. That's how I interpreted it. But
no. So when I think about the goals from a career building perspective, I always think that you should have short-term and long-term, because that long-term path is obviously, you want to be making intentional steps toward long-term goals. And then the short-term goals, I would put timeframes around them. So if you have a goal of being back in the office 5 days a week by the end of December, you want to be really, I think, really specific about what the goals are. If that is what you're saying. So short term, I would say you want to have short term and give them time-based opportunity. I mean, it's going to be different for everyone depending on how much you're back in the office and what those goals are. But I would say that the best goals are those that are time-based and have a sense of real, tangible feasibility, and that they're very specific. I mean, all I can hear in my head is SMART goals, which I think is specific, measurable, accountable, accessible. I never remember these. Somebody does. Somebody else remembers them. I don't really abide by it beyond the fact that it should be time-based. It should be specific, and then measurable. Certainly, you want to know how you'll know whether or not you reached it. So that's what I like. Definitely short-term goals. Certainly long-term goals, because the long-term goals, those short-term goals are like the small steps you can take towards your bigger long-term goals. That's always, whenever I'm thinking about how to vision for your career, how to build your aspirations and goals, have a big goal that is far away, but be doing things today that are leading you there. And again, this process that we're talking about today about back to work or any transition point can very much be used to build that same pathway. I mean, all of these processes are really ways to help find clarity and challenge. In terms of time to think about how long you should take to build your goals, I would say, early and often you should be thinking and checking in and reevaluating what the goals are at any point, and certainly keeping track. So if you set goals, and even if you did it 6 months ago, you should reflect and redo them. I think goals should be iterative always, certainly until, except for those very specific ones that you're trying to reach, but checking in, keeping progress, keeping track of your wins, what you're struggling with. So maybe you can go back and think about, do you have to rethink about what that goal is, or is there something you need to do differently to reach the goal?
This answers this person's question. So I just to let you know, thank you.
SMART, by the way, SMART goals are specific, measurable, actionable. There it is, relevant, and anchored in, T is the weird one, anchored in a time period.
Time-based, right? It's time-based. Yeah, that A, I'm always like, actionable, accountable. Thank you. I appreciate that. Clearly, I don't use SMART goals all that often beyond from a theoretical standpoint of just making sure you're being very specific. Anything? Okay. Well, we can keep going on this stuff then, because I think the obstacles are time is, I think when I was thinking about that as a block, there's 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. And we have a lot of things pulling on our time. So I was thinking more of, when you're thinking about what those goals are, you probably also want to be realistic about what is feasible given all of your other commitments, because time can be a blocker in some ways. And time is external, real, there's only so much of it. But at the same time, you can always build time management strategies and try to make sure that you can be as efficient as possible in the time that you do have. But some of the core ones I want to call out here, I think, are really four buckets. So through the coach training I did years ago, they really talk about 4 specific obstacles, and I cannot find a different version that I like better. So the 4 they're the biggest ones here: assumptions, limited beliefs, gremlins, which is a silly word, but there's a whole, gremlin, we'll just call it a gremlin, and interpretations. And those tend to be, you could almost bucket these internal thought processes we have that can hold us back and really be our inner critics. Those tend to be the 4 buckets they fall into. So again, I know we all understand what these words actually mean, but just for sake of making it even more clear in how I'm thinking about it when it comes to internal obstacles, limited beliefs are something that you kind of accept about the world or about yourself that you believe to be true that limits you in some way. So let me think of an example. I mean, a simple example: if I cry at work, everyone's going to think I'm weak. Or if I make a mistake, I'll get fired. Like those are beliefs we hold that really aren't true, but are feelings that can absolutely hold you back. And I'm sure now that I've said this, you're going to notice these thoughts come up all the time. And then assumptions is the assumption that because it was one way before, or because it happened before, that it's bound to happen again. And that one, I think, is an interesting one as I think about this process of going back to work right now and what that might look like, and the way that potentially flexible work arrangements were viewed in the past versus what I hope is how they're viewed now. Before, I think there was a lot of assumptions around the idea of, no one that I work with, I'm now a new mother. No other mother that I used to work with or that I work with has ever been able to have a flexible work arrangement. So then there's no way they'd let me, right? So like letting ourselves get held back by these assumptions that are based in, because it happened one way before, it's bound to happen that way again. So I like to think about this one in this instance in particular, because maybe in the past you did ask for a flexible work arrangement and were told no, and then worked from home for the past 18 months. And now everyone's coming back and they're saying, no, everyone has to be back in the office, which of course there's been some companies have been out there saying that. So it would be reasonable to assume that if you were to ask for a flexible work arrangement again, that the answer would be no. But to just take that without asking is letting that assumption hold you back. Because if you don't ask, the answer is definitely no. It's definitely not going to happen if you don't ask. So it's just that idea of challenging any assumptions that we might hold on to based on past experiences, based on others' experiences. So that's assumptions. I'm going to I like to do gremlins last, but just my eyes are going like a clock. So I'm going with gremlins now. Gremlins is really that inner critic that in some way, shape, or form is telling you that you're not something enough, not good enough, not smart enough. It's imposter syndrome. It's just those thoughts that we have that really make us question ourselves and not believe in ourselves in the way that we should. So again, that one, I mean, I think everybody, I hope none of you can come up with ideas of this that you have, but I think it's typically very normal that we have our own worst enemy thoughts. And that's really what this is meant to represent. So I'm going back to work and, oh God, I haven't put on clothes and normal clothes except for, Zoom appropriate in 18 months. And I'm not going to look professional. Like just things like that we could just spin on. I'm not going to, all these other thoughts that you can have. I'm not smart enough. They're going to know that I was constantly distracted and I got nothing done over the 18 months. Who knows what the thoughts would be, but there'll be something. And then interpretations. I actually really like interpretations because I think it encompasses so much of how we experience the world, because so much of the way we experience it is all about something happening. And it's not just what happens, it's our response that leads to the outcome. So the outcome that we experience is not just what happened, it's our response to what happened. So interpretations would be if you have an opinion or a judgment on a person, a situation, an experience, or anything, and you believe it to be true. I think in this day and age, this is an easy one to think about. Like, I text my friend and they didn't respond, they must hate me. I don't know if anyone gets that drastic, but things like that, where it's like, oh, I messaged my boss and he took 2 weeks to respond. He doesn't care about my growth anymore, or I made him mad. Like, you start to spin on all these things that are not reality, but have become this new reality that you believe to be true. And it's just all based on sort of not assumptions, I won't use that word, interpretations of the experience. So I think that one comes up a lot, and we don't necessarily realize we're doing it because mostly we're trying to understand and trying to build an experience or an understanding of an experience that's happened, but it's all in our own heads. So all of these things come up. So I just think about, with going back to work, I would imagine there's a lot of these that are going to come up for folks. And I think it's really important to think about them. And I don't just bring them up to say, oh yeah, those are really bad thoughts, good luck. What I really want to do is give you ways to challenge them. So assumptions, we can start there, but with assumptions, you want to think about, like, what makes you think that will happen again? And just because it did before, why now? What's different now? What could be different now? Are you different now? So if it was a question you asked before, if it's something you've seen others, like, well, we're in a new world. So I think it's just challenging the assumptions that you're making. So again, I bring up the obstacles to bring the awareness to them, because if we're aware of those thoughts, we can see them almost as outsiders versus a truth in our own heads. So just explaining them, even talking through them, you start to notice when you have them. And that awareness is really helpful to take forward. So now you can be aware of them. And now it's like, well, what do I do with it? Well, you challenge it. You challenge the heck out of it. It takes practice. It's mindset and behavior shifts that you need to continually practice to get good at. But it's amazing once you have sort of a framework to bucket all these nasty thoughts into, how well you can use just questioning in your own brain to get you through them. So that assumptions, it's like, what makes me think it will happen again? What's different now? What could happen instead? Like, you just question. For Gremlins is trickier, but I think the awareness just alone is enough to start to challenge those. So if you're thinking in your head, I'm not good enough, I can't do this. What if they know that I, have lost all of my ability to focus? Or what if they know that I had the hardest year I've ever had in my life and I lost so many family and I can't focus? It's all these thoughts. It's just bringing awareness to, those aren't truth. Those are just your own terrible thoughts. They come in to protect you. So you have these, okay, this is like hard because it's like confusing. But so if you're thinking to yourself, I'm not enough, often it's because you're afraid not to be enough. So that fear is being veiled by really, really nasty thinking of yourself. So bringing awareness to that and then recognizing, oh, okay, maybe I have some fear here. What can I do with that? I mean, fear is tough, but the awareness of the fact that it's fear that's driving some of that thinking can allow you to then think, okay, well, I'm afraid. So that probably means I'm at a point of potential growth, and I'm just going to recognize that, and I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to believe in myself. Sounds super easy, but it's not. But I think it's important just to know that those thoughts aren't real and to challenge them. Well, they might be real, they're happening, but they're really coming from another place, and it's typically more fear driven. For interpretations, this one I love, because if you start spinning, which I do, I think this is such a common thing to do. Like, oh my gosh, they didn't respond, or that email was short, and now I'm not sure if I did something wrong. Did I mess up? What are they thinking? Oh gosh, like that spin cycle. When that starts to happen, when you realize you now thought, oh gosh, my boss is mad at me because I asked for a flexible schedule. Well, what are 5 other ways to look at the situation? If you weren't you, what would another person say about the interaction? What would be the opposing view? What if he's so excited that you're asking for a flexible schedule that he's doing cartwheels and he can't get back to you? Like, there's so many scenarios you could play out, but sitting in a place of swirling without knowing it's not good for you. So as you think about what these obstacles are, that's how you break through them. That's how you make sure they don't come up for you as you're entering back into work. Think about how you challenge them and what they are and why they're happening, and then challenge the heck out of them. Oh, and then assumptions. I already talked about assumptions. The limited belief is, you want to think about, how true is that, first of all? Where did that idea come from? So like I think my example was, if I am emotional at work, they're going to think I'm weak or something like that. If I make a mistake, I'm going to get fired. Like, how true is it that you're not allowed to make mistakes? And then if you can question how true it is, well, where'd that idea come from? Well, why do I think if I make one mistake, I'm going to get fired? Has anyone else? Where's that come from? What am I afraid of? And then how it affects you. So if I know that I don't show any emotion at work, for example, because I'm afraid I'll look weak, what am I missing out on? How's that affecting me? How's that affecting my relationships at work? What does that look like? What does emotion really mean? So there's all these, you can just start really challenging yourself and questioning where these limited beliefs come from. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that this is the most powerful part of the process in terms of thinking about, well, maybe that's just for me, because clearly I showed my cards by saying control is one of my values. So I like to think of what's the worst case scenario, and then how do I protect myself against it? That's probably my gremlin. I'm not prepared or something like that. But thinking about what these mental blocks are and how we'll challenge them is a way to get ahead of kind of holding yourself back and unblock those obstacles so that you can really reach your fullest potential in this process.